Hello, everyone. Welcome to the not the first regional. So this is the second regional, and which will focus into Europe and Americas. That's the session we are going to have in this celebration of International Women's Day. This program is hosted by UNITAR, IFES, and GEDC. And wherever you are in this world, we extend our hearty welcome to this session. And hopefully you have been watching us since the first opening session and watched the first regional session, which focused on the Asia and Pacific. I'm Soma Chakrabarti. I'm the first vice president of IFES, and I work for ANSYS, the global leader in engineering simulation. Now, we will be starting this session very soon, but I wanted to give you some housekeeping stuff. First of all, when you have all the attendees have some questions and comments, please use the question answer box of this webinar and submit your question, and we will answer those questions at the end of the panelist discussions. This is the third session of all 6 sessions. The first was the opening. The second is this one. Sorry, the previous one. The third is this one. There will be 2 more regional sessions, and then we will have a closing ceremony. The link for all these sessions is the same. So the link you have used for the opening or the Asia Pacific session, you are going to use for this session. Europe and Americas, you will be using for other sessions. And you are on mute. So of the entire time as attendee, and we will be speaking and keep the question answer as I said. One of the things that I want to mention, there are breaks between sessions. Like we had a half-hour break between the second and this regional session, that is the third session. Make sure that you get a little break between the session, and when you come back refreshed, we'll be joining you again. Without further ado, I want to introduce first our wonderful colleague, Michael Adalla from UNITAR. Now, Michael, I came to know you today, but I think I have heard about you before. And if I'm not wrong, you are based in Germany, right?
Geneva.
Geneva? Okay, good. Okay, you are based in Geneva. You are the deputy for the division or the portfolio manager for finance, trade, and anti-corruption division of prosperity at UNITAR. Michael manages the design, development, and implementation of training activities and supports partnership development related to trade and finance programs of UNITAR. Michael, may we have a few words from you on behalf of UNITAR?
Thank you, Soma. Hello, everyone. On behalf and welcome, if you've been viewing the presentations earlier on, welcome back. And if you are tuning in for the first time, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be viewing this webinar. And welcome to our second panel of the day, focusing on Latin America, European, and American context. Latin America globally has been one of the highest percentage of women working in STEM, at around 45% according to the UN Women Report. Despite this, UN Women also reports that the pandemic has disproportionately affected women and girls in Latin America, with some estimates noting that as many as 118 million women and girls will be left in poverty. Cultural and social forces also dominate women and girls' access to education and the subsequent ability to work in various STEM fields. For this session, we explore how women working in STEM in the Americas and in Europe are coping with the effects of the pandemic. I would like to thank our distinguished panel members who all come together to share their thoughts and insights with us. On behalf of UNITAR, I also would like to thank all our viewers who are coming for this session. Soma, I would like to bring the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. We appreciate this partnership amongst these three organizations, UNITAR and IFES and GEDC, and appreciate having us in this whole conference to celebrate International Women's Day. We have our esteemed colleagues as panelists in this session, the Americas, the Latin America, South America, and North America. And then we have Europe. Let me introduce our couple of panelists, and then maybe first I will start introducing one panelist, and then I will come back and introduce. I just want to say it's not only about women. On International Women's Day, we also want to know from if I say the other side, that is from men. So we have also Paul Gilbert here, and I will introduce you too. We have Adriana Páez here, Renetta is here, and we have Lidia, who we saw a little bit, and then she will come back, I think. So Europe is represented by Lidia. North America's, I think, yes, Paul, you are in Canada, if I'm not wrong. Yes, we have from Canada and from United States, Renetta is from United States. We have from South America, Adriana, and we also have Uriel Kukerman to help Adriana to so that we can translate from Spanish to English and vice versa in question answering. So I'll start with actually Adriana. Adriana is the immediate past president of the Latin American and Caribbean Consortium of Engineering Institutions, which we call LESIA sometimes. And I keep on getting emails from there. And we have read your personal and professional story in the Rising to the Top, that book, which is the first one, which is here, this one. And so we are very, very interested in knowing your thoughts on women in STEM during this pandemic, how they're coping, how they're finding ways to work. It's to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Soma. Good morning. I am introduction for my theme. Good morning, good afternoon to all the guests and the audience who are with us today. First of all, I want to thank you for invitation as a speaker to UNITAR, IFES, and GDC. The World Economic Forum mentioned in the wake of the pandemic that women around the world are losing their jobs and doing more unpaid work. As my experience, on April of last year, I lost my job and I decided to volunteer, contribute to the situation of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on two projects on importance to me, led the webinars of GDC Latam and the creation of the Open Latin American Chair, Matilda, and Women Engineering, I believe this allow me to face challenges and face resilience. Excuse me. One moment, please.
Okay.
I am frustrated, and I know that one I am currently experience as part of biggest setback in gender inequality. COVID-19 is having a profound impact on a woman like me. We have lost in terms on gender equality and women's economic rights. I have stumbled by my gender in male work, where today, a few years from my retirement, I will surely not have a decent salary or simply not be employed. The award is marked in a society and history women in Latin America. We characterize women by the dedication to our family, to our children, to the house, to teach our children. During COVID-19, the kids are studying at the home, so women take more care of the family and education, creating three possible situations to women. The first one is that women stop working, losing the opportunity to continue working because of the situation some companies are facing. Some companies took this opportunity to decrease their employers, and women were their first choice because of the historical context of taking care of the house. The second situation is that women lower their performance at work because of the chores and to be the teacher of the children at home. And finally, others women stop studying because it was not a priority either due to face financial problems or their own decision to postpone. Postpone. But the same context, the men face two positions of this reality. On one side, you have the men that understand the situation and is happy to support their family, sharing housework and helping with their children. On the other side, there are men that even thought about help around the house, that they should not be doing this activity because it's a responsibility for women. What happened at the houses during the pandemic transfers to the jobs. Employers recognize that women have the burden in the house, and this is not only happening to women in the STEM in our Latin American context, but we have also shown the ability to overcome circumstance. This is not only now. Throughout history, we have shown the resilience to overcome so many barriers. We women will contribute to improve the condition for our countries because we are characterized by strength and resilience.
Yeah.
Now, let me bring to the table the sustainable development goal number 5, achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. This goal frames women in STEM. More women had made progress in recent decades with leadership positions and had contributed to STEM and to progress in law reform to promote gender equality. Despite it, this advance, many discriminatory challenges remain, and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic could reverse the limited progress that has been made on gender equality and women's rights. I believe that it has shown us that women have not only been the most affected by this pandemic, but will also be the backbone of recovery and the center of digital transformation in the new technological era that will help both economies with better development outcomes and sustainable for all, support faster recovery, and put the world on basis for activity the sustainable development goals. Thank you, Soma.
Thank you. You actually gave us a lot of hope that women will be the backbone of the recovery from the pandemic in the digital transformation and all the aspects that are required to overcome the tough time that collectively we have gone through and are still going through. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We are now going to Renetta, and I know your name for a long time, and I know that you were in the East Coast and went to the West Coast, if I'm not wrong. So Dr. Renetta Tull is the Vice Chancellor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at University of California, Davis. Before joining the UC Davis in 2019, Dr. Tull was Associate Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County and Professor of Practice at UMBC's College of Engineering and IT. How about you share your thoughts on women in STEM during this pandemic, and share from the point of view of the US and what has happened? You are mute. You are self-muted.
Okay, I think I'm good now.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Soma, for that introduction. And I have to thank Adriana also for her comments. I so enjoyed them. And, you know, one of the issues related to this pandemic is that we haven't been able to get together. We haven't been able to see one another at conferences. I probably would have seen Adriana and others on this panel several times over the past several years, but instead I haven't seen them in almost a year and a half. And so I've really missed that interaction. But I'm happy to see everyone here this morning, particularly on this webinar. So good morning, and thank you to IFES, to GEDC, to UNITAR, and happy International Women's Day. I'm really happy to be joining you, Soma, as you said, from California on the West Coast of the United States. And so I have a West Coast now perspective as well as an East Coast perspective. And I'm excited to share some of my experience, but also speaking broadly. And so I'm going to start though by sharing my perspective from as an administrator at a university, as a vice chancellor in the chancellor's cabinet at a university that has nearly 40,000 students and more than 20,000 employees. I'm at the University of California, Davis, which is in the northern part of California, near Sacramento, which is the capital of the state. And in the news, California has been very hard hit by the pandemic. We have had several, just when we talk about the enormous number of cases, enormous numbers of deaths, we have had to pivot in a number of ways. And our state has really tried to make sure that we're keeping as many people safe as possible. We still, unfortunately, have had a lot of loss, and we have had to contend with that and deal with that. We went into shelter in place and remote instruction almost exactly a year ago in March of 2019. And at that time, at least on the campus, we were just trying to figure out what was going on. And I think that it's really interesting because I recently got on a plane for the first time in about a year for a family emergency. I actually had to go back to the East Coast. But prior to that, I hadn't been on a plane since February of 2020. And it was at a conference for the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And it was in Seattle. And around February of 2020 in Seattle, that was when everything was starting to really happen. And I remember being in sessions and people were sneezing and coughing, and we were literally passing around tissue boxes, and people were buying tissues and just trying to figure out why everyone was getting sick. And we were crowded in rooms like any conference where you go to an esteemed speaker's talk and people are standing around and sitting close together, but then everybody is sneezing and coughing and trying to figure out. And I just remember thinking, I don't know what is going on. I am going to leave. And as soon as my part was over and I got to see a couple of colleagues, I actually went back to the hotel, packed my bags, and went to the airport early just so I could get out of there. Little did I know that we would have to start shutting down things at the university and make these dramatic pivots. And at this point, we're trying to cover for needs of our constituents, making sure that our frontline workers at the university hospital, at the health campus, at the medical school, at our nursing school, that they have all the support that they needed. We needed to make sure that they had the right PPE, that the protective wear. We needed to make sure that we were being flexible, that we had available beds for patients. We were changing over dorms to make sure that there was going to be room in case we had students who were sick. How were we going to connect to message to families, etc.? We needed to do anything that we could to make sure that we had things in place that would be both life-saving and life-sustaining. We also needed to make sure that we were still conducting educational processes. So was Wi-Fi still going to be widely available? What about basic needs such as food insecurity? And then making sure that people had mental health resources, for example, available online. And that was a far cry from things that we had tried to do at the university, where we had gotten to a point where we were destigmatizing mental health. We had drop-in centers and people could go at any time in person to see a counselor, and then all of that goes away and you have to pivot to something that's online, such a different modality. And while I'm an engineer by training, my current position as Vice Chancellor is for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I work with my team to both sound alarms when there are inequities, but also to help to develop solutions. And we're just in a constant cycle of finding out about issues and working across units to try to find solutions, and then making sure that communities or stakeholders, whether they be staff, faculty, students, members of our community. There was one time where we were supporting a bus that was going around to different communities with Wi-Fi, because there were communities that didn't have Wi-Fi available and couldn't get onto online services, whether they were medical services or educational services or other kinds of things. Bags of groceries were made available on the lawn of the campus center on Thursdays for students. Mental health professionals had to increase, and faculty are and were doing their best to be even more available for students, but not just to be available for students. We found that they were being available for students' families as well, because now students were in their homes. There were a lot of things that had to be broken down because now students were in their homes and not in the classrooms. And so people had to be sensitive to that, had to be sensitive to students who had families of their own, whether they were children or otherwise, and sometimes living in situations where they had multiple members of the family in the household who also needed to use the facilities, needed to use computers and Wi-Fi, and they were sharing. And so, yes, every assignment couldn't be done on time. And yes, there were periods of time where people were just unfortunately saddened and depressed by the situations. And we had to figure out how we could do that. In the US experience, and in California in particular, we not only had COVID-19, but we also had racial unrest, and that compounded this entire situation. So after the death of Ahmaud Arbery in Atlanta, Georgia, and Breonna Taylor who was shot by police, and George Floyd, which the whole world saw. That was a pivoting moment in May and June of 2020, because then we had all of the things, the deaths, the cases going on with COVID-19, as well as racial unrest. And we had particularly youth who were saying, we are willing to risk our health to go out and protest to make sure that people know how we feel about this situation. And so the Black Lives Matter movement moved to the forefront. We were trying to figure out how we were going to mitigate things in California, because we knew people were upset and needed to share their voice. And so I remember a pivotal moment where we had to make some decisions. We knew people were going to protest. How could they protest safely? Right, so we were out there as the university, as the health system. Literally, I was standing literally on pedestals, handing out masks to people during protests, handing out bottles of water, making sure that they were going to be hydrated, because it was a movement that couldn't be stopped. And on one side, you had people who were hurting because of the racial unrest, but also people were dying because of COVID-19, and that was being protested as well. And later on, a couple of months after that, in California, we had the California wildfires. Now, what did we do then? We had to stay inside because the air quality was so bad. I literally had ash that was coming into my backyard, falling like snow, because there were trees and all kinds of things that were on fire. So COVID was telling us, the COVID mandates were saying, go out, get some air. That's what the message was around the country. Get some air, have exercise, take care of your physical health and mental health. But in California, we had to stay in for several weeks because we couldn't go out, because we couldn't breathe the air outside. So we had these three things that were compounding. And what were we to do? We had to make sure that staff still felt supported. We had to make sure that there were going to be food available, that we had to make sure that people were being treated with respect. We had Asian Americans, and still have the situation now in the US, where Asian people from the Asian community were being tormented and spat upon, and in some cases physically harmed, because people were blaming them for COVID-19, just without any sense of person at all. So we're in diversity, equity, inclusion, we're fighting xenophobia, and we're putting out statements, and we're trying to make sure that communities are safe. There are a number of other things, and in fact, in California, I'll get to the end very soon, but so much disproportionate levels of cases and deaths, particularly in the Latino community and the African American community, where the numbers of the population are one thing, but the numbers of deaths and the percentages of deaths are so much higher than those percentages. And I have numbers, but I won't get into that right now. But I will say that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So in Davis, we had a remarkable experiment called Healthy Davis Together. It was an experiment where we had some government funding, some donor funding, university funds, and they came together, our university as well as the city of Davis, to develop a campaign called Healthy Davis Together. And what we decided to do was to create a bubble, if you will, to sort of protect people against COVID. We have testing centers all across the city where people can get tested for free at any time. I get tested once a week, for example, going to the local recreational facility. We're now in a red tier where everyone is masked on a regular basis. They keep their distance, that's 6 feet apart. There is now ventilation guidance, filtered air guidance, air quality guidance. And so now we're in a period of hope. We have hope because of vaccinations that are being widespread, although we don't have enough doses going around, but people are set up for the distribution of vaccinations. And we're really hoping that we're going to be in person soon. And so I will wait until the Q&A for other kinds of things, but that's just a snapshot of some of the things that we're seeing here in the US. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renetta. I mean, this was quite a bit. I mean, I can't imagine. I'm just sitting at home in my Cambridge department, and I can't imagine so many things happening. Especially, I have been to UC Davis, so I know the big, huge campus, and especially the agricultural work that goes on as a land grant university. So I will be having some questions. I'm sure people are writing questions, so we'll have questions for you related to women and this pandemic at the end. But let me now go to Lidia Zakowska. And Lidia Zakowska, I have talked to her so many times in so many different contexts. So it doesn't feel like that I haven't seen her for a long time or so. She is currently working at the as a civil engineering faculty, transport systems unit at Krakow University of Technology in Poland. Lidia does research in transportation engineering, environmental and safety aspects of mobility, and gender equality in engineering. Our current project is Gender Equality in Engineering through Communication and Commitment, GEECCO, or GECO, I guess. Lidia, the floor is yours. Let us learn from you how you handle the women in STEM during this pandemic. What are the difficulties they were facing, and what are the good points from the European context?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this kind invitation. I feel honored to be in such a group of not only experts, but wonderful people who really have their important stories to share. Renetta, I'm so I'm so touched by your story from California. You know that in Europe, we used to say that in California, bananas are dropping from the sky and that it's a happiness place. And just things like pandemia or another difficult situation can happen everywhere. After your story, I think there is nothing interesting I can say from Poland or from Europe in general, but it's not true. I will try to continue my my story anyway. But well, I love California, and I cannot imagine how it might all happen together and you get across at university. Anyway, so Poland, you know, fantastic, beautiful country, rich of culture and history, starting from our Marie Curie Skłodowska, the double prize winner in science, and our role model, of course, to all, let's say, women, and to cross the gender equality issues by today. But I am not only was studying, but also working all the time at a technical university, which is a community stereotypically male. Engineering is a main issue. And even it's not true anymore, because we have 50 and 50% of men and women students at engineering at our university in general. Then maybe it's not that good when we go to the position of professorship. It's very, very slow. Let's say 12% only. But this is a current work connected to all what is happening. And in fact, pandemia made those things more difficult, but more difficult both in teaching and in research projects. But at the same time, it showed that it is not to be avoided anymore to say that the problem does not exist. Why? Just imagine, Poland was in situation, especially my university, that at the very beginning of this pandemic time, which was March 2020, it was a year ago, when the first pandemic deaths were noted in Europe, Poland and our university decided to switch on to completely 100% online teaching. So of course it was difficult for continuing projects, for making meetings, for learning how to exchange knowledge, etc. It took a huge amount of time, both for students, but especially for professors to prepare all those online meetings. So that was, let's say, not easy, but it was possible. About those teaching activities and students and session and exams, the problem in fact was that within engineering, it's not possible for some part of our engineering knowledge to make test or exam which is online. I mean, I can share my example. I teach students special imagination and graphical design, and some parts of the things can switch just online, but to make test on your visibility and creativity, it's something like impossible to make a test and to make choice between the numbers. So that was the thing that students asked even for a permission, special permission, that we can come back for one day with a special requirements, with special things like a distance and masks, etc., to meet for a day and to really let them communicate to show what are the effects. But when this second academic year started in October, it was a decision already having a lot of debt and problems, and we were much more, let's say, already prepared for this online work at university. So we started the second semester, the first winter semester, and then with not only the pandemic kind of grow up again, and it was a complete lockdown about coming out at streets and communicate and not meeting with any groups, and lockdown of or restaurants and whatever, which is supermarkets, only the very first needs. That was difficult because our students escaped from Krakow. They went to their homes all over Poland or to another countries if they were from our international European program Erasmus students. And so then this communication was harder about the amount of time we had to try to communicate. And what happened? And we had this women's strike. Maybe you heard about this. That this anti-abortion rules were raised by our government, and this made all young people to go out at streets. And that was not only women, there was the same amount of young men and women, and of course people like me as well. But the university community were the most important, mostly represented at this thousands of hundreds of people in all big academic centers, especially like Krakow. And it came like every day or every Sunday, coming onto the markets, to the square, etc. And it was pandemia. So they called it "We Are Walking" because it started arrested and things like. And what was fantastic about our Polish community of university decision makers, I mean rectors from Poland, they had so CRASP organization of those rectors from technical university and from general. They immediately met online and signed the decree that they support these movements for freedom of choice for young generation, and they will not make any bad consequences to those students who are not at their classroom online, And that was, of course, not understandable by our government, who was strictly, women, home and kitchen, etc. So it's against the law. We will arrest you. We will give you fines, etc. So that was fantastic because at my university, all deans signed the same day that they ask every professor, every teacher to help them to make the online teaching, another time if they feel like to be and to protest. This protest is still going on, but of course, because of pandemic, they are kind of locked down and went to another platform, to platform of exchange, because young people do not agree with this lack of freedom. Even the beginning was about abortion. Now they have a lot of postulates, and they really are stronger and stronger as a community of men and women together, understanding that even there is difficult time of pandemic or whatever, the gender equality and things like freedom in research, freedom in teaching, freedom of choice, and diversity is important. So in such a general situation, we are still operating in Poland, and the example I wanted to share with you is about this European project without the research. The pure research is something, another sphere. So we learn how to meet online and how to exchange documents and publish. It's a big loss that we cannot meet personally within gender equality issues at academia, because it's not the same, with such a huge load of information now available, just to get to the point and to meet people who are interesting is not the same like to share your ideas and to see your eyes. So some of those horizon projects which are financed by the European community, we have those common money put by all European countries from European Union to one box, and from them we just share for those projects who the special commissions found most interesting to fund. So for the first time, to the technical universities came a program who financed gender equality plans for technical universities, as it is well known that this stereotype of men engineering is still living, and it has nothing to do, is not correlate with the reality of who are an engineer today. So finally, we did not stop the project. We decided to continue and to finish it by the same date. Some other projects, the second one, gender equality in Eastern and Central European countries, which is ACT project, ACT on Gender, the huge European one, part of my countries and those, let's say, younger European countries. We decided and asked for prolongation because of this difficulty how to communicate. But we are working still. Of course, many aspects, like we could not use some of the funds which were planned because conferences are not on, because meetings can be not realized, workshops can be not made internationally on the same level of experts and doing things. But this can be overcame, and probably we can share the, let's say, implementation of those gender equality plans. But this is interesting how much reluctant and barriers still exist in cooperation. The project name is Gender Equality in Engineering through Cooperation and Commitment. We do made a huge cooperation, but there are still a very slow commitment, and this can be only if you have a chance to go to look at the face of your rector and to discuss, to explain, not only to send documents. I'm very positive.
I can.
Yes, that's my statement.
Okay, I have something for Paul, actually,
Yeah.
questions. I will come back to you, Lidia. because we have a number of questions for you also, and I have something. We have to move on with Paul a little bit, and then we'll come back. Okay? Sorry about it.
For this longer implementation, but it's really impressive after Renetta how it can happen around the world. Thank
Sure,
you.
and we'll come back to that question
Okay.
and the thoughts that you are going to share with us. Let me give Paul a chance because here is the thing. Behind it is always said that behind every man there is a woman or women who stand behind the man and make that man successful. But I have learned from my experience, behind every successful woman, there it's equally uh, important that there are or there is a man who stood beside or behind that woman, and there could be men who stood behind or beside that woman and made that woman successful. So you are here, Paul, to give us from a man's perspective, how did you see that the women are facing challenges in during this pandemic, the women in STEM specifically? We are all women in STEM here, and how they're facing challenges. And have you seen anything very specific? How would you like to describe? You are self-muted and is muted by an organizer. Yep.
Okay. Well, good day to everyone, and thank you so much for having me. You know, it's reminded me when you talked about a year ago, I was with my sister on her birthday in England, and I believe Adriana and yourself are sharing a birthday today. It's certainly a fantastic honor for me to participate in this event, and I want to thank the audience for inviting me. Great opportunity to reflect on the challenges we've experienced. My role, and as you mentioned, my role as a man in this and trying to find some doing, and frankly, it's consumed me for the past couple of weeks. You know, I really do feel some trepidation today in the stages. In fact, when I told my eldest daughter, who's just starting her career in social justice in the UK, about my her eyes, and I'm afraid I can't repeat what she said in public. But I do think it's crucial for men to play a role in finding solutions to make the work environment more welcoming and inclusive. And I want to focus on this aspect of like practical. You know, personally, I can't claim to be an expert in this area on the public stage. Of small and medium-sized businesses, which represent well over 50% of the GDP in most countries around the world, along just the impact on the GDP around the world, the importance of the inclusion of women, and how critical it is to think about design, you know, fit for purpose. The number of solutions and products which are not designed properly because women weren't in. The number of women who are involved and should be involved. We need to encourage women to be in the workplace, wherever that may be. So I feel a great responsibility, and I ask myself the questions all the time. What have I done? My personal perspective as a CEO and as a business owner, I have 3 daughters, very talented. I have a very strong wife and a strong network of friends, and 2 older sisters. I'm lucky to have strong and forth. Actually, the GEDC and the IFES community also allows me to meet with very strong women who admonish me enough, and I think that's fair. Because having experienced women in my company, we have 25%, most of them have a technical background. It's not enough, but I know the positive and profound impact they have on the company. It's not enough. It's challenging because large companies do snap up young women, but there's only 20% of the. I would love to find a way that we can influence that at the earlier stages as well. So what do? Quanta work, teaching in for universities. And you can imagine, just like Renetta said, when the pandemic hit, it literally shut down. The last thing on people's minds was buying equipment for labs and buying equipment for teaching undergraduates. You're concerned about safety, about how you're going to deal with exams, how you're going to take care of people going online. There were a million things you had to worry about. Unfortunately, the wall and our business went down significantly, and it was terrifying for everybody. So to September, it was really uncertain. And my role was to try and keep as many jobs as I could and the integrity of the company. We went into survival mode. My focus was on maintaining jobs and the integrity of the company. As I said, it was an unprecedented. It was crisis. Our main goal was to stay afloat. And I'm sure this played out all over the world. Those are the issues that were the main concern. I've got 3 daughters. I've got a strong wife. I have 2 older sisters. I didn't focus on that. I focused on the business. I think that's what happened around the world. It took a while because so much was happening. We're drinking from the firehouse. Remember, I'm a small company, so I be surgical about what we spent our time on. So it probably took us around 3 or 4 months to start really some health concerns and the balance and how it affected the women and other people, single people, marginalized people. It took a while. And frankly, it really did upset me. It upset me quite a lot when I said it was pointed out to me by some of the forthright women in my life that we should be doing more. That I owed the company, we should do more to help and support this. So as a company, it's unfortunate because my director of HR is a woman. She's actually a woman of color. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. And doesn't answer very easily. So when I've given her the absolute impact whenever she's necessary, and she does, believe me. We provided flexible work hours. Flexible work hours for women was incredible, especially those with young children dealing with childcare issues. And it's a no guilt policy. If you have to take time off between 10 and 11 you take that time off. It doesn't matter. There's no guilt. If you have to have your children on your lap, nobody is going to worry about that whatsoever. I have had this bit of an accident. There's a no camera culture in our world. And for some women, appearance is real, and that's, as you all know. My wife, she has to worry about her makeup, her hair, the clothes she's wearing. It's not such a big, I put on a night. It's a huge difference for women in the workplace. So having the ability to have meetings with the camera off when like they want to be on camera turned out to be an interesting kind of side issue. We also created 30-day challenges. And well, typically, and this is a generalization, I know, and I have 3 daughters, so I've got to be careful what I say, to be honest, in case they're watching. More collaborative, generally speaking, than men. And I think the connection that they need was heightened. I'm a social animal, people who feel the need to participate in something. So we created 30-day challenges. And many, many more women, 80% of the women in my got it, and they achieved things that maybe they thought they couldn't, like they started running, or they started reading, or they started doing yoga, or they met. Lots of these activities I think were really important. We've supported versus over the age support for young students. There's a program in San Antonio, University of Incarnate Word. It's a program for robotics for girls in engineering, and maths and science. We've done all of those things. Honestly, the last few weeks, as I've been researching and reading and listening to today's stories, I keep thinking in space to welcome women. Are we providing that environment which enables women to A, get to the table, are they able to speak? And I've had some of the very strong women in my company, even the strongest ones who are maybe leaders, they've been working with me for a number of years, even they find it hard to explain or bring things up to me if it benefits them. Men are not like that. Men, if you want something, we were very verbal about it, more reticent to be aggressive about taking ownership. And you know the kinds of words that he used about assertive women. And so reflecting on the pandemic, there's a few things that I just really want to highlight. Men are the problem, and we should be a part of the solution. And it concerns me that someone that has such a strong female orientation of women in my orbit in some areas. What's it like for people who've never had female role models and who grow up with no women around them at all? They have no insights, challenges that women face all the way through, you know, at high school, at university, the discrimination, you know, the kind of the patting on the head, you know, you go, why don't you take notes while we do the real work? That kind of stuff has to stop. So we attended the immediate needs, the financial crisis, but we delayed our response to some of the mental health and women concerns. And that's something which I'm committed to changing. And I'm going to start some activities within my company where we're going to be much more proactive about these things. I think we've been developing a welcoming culture, which is it's human-centric culture, but I think we need to go one step beyond. And my appeal is to all of the other leadership positions or running companies like myself to really take a look at what's possible and to try and provide a space, an environment at your companies where women are able to and sometimes ask the louder spoken men to maybe not speak as women to speak up, because we do know that the young women, when they get to the table, it's difficult for them to be seen as, you know, a certain type of woman, which is kind of a hypocritical way to describe them relative. So my question, my overarching question is, how do we reach the men who are not aware, have the background, their journey to wherever they are has not brought that into their orbit? And how do people like become your allies and bring a more inviting experience to people in STEM? Wax about the number of benefits that women provide in design, but I'll talk about one, the notion of collaboration. Mistakes, because guys pounding the table, my idea is the best idea. That doesn't happen. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll leave it there and look forward to the questions.
Soma, they mute them.
Okay, I couldn't unmute myself. So anyway, thank you so much, Paul. And I wish that all of us really together can work on this, because this is an important issue that regardless of pandemic, men and women, both voices should be heard on the table. We have actually had a lot of questions gathered here. So I'm going to start asking the questions. The first question, it doesn't say from whom, but it says to whom. It's from Renetta. People say that out of great crisis arises our best opportunity. How, amidst America's political unrest, racial uprising, and a global pandemic, have you, as a woman of color, overcome and created a space for opportunity?
Great question. I would say that it's made me much more aware of issues across ranks of women. So I think things that the Academy sets up in terms of hierarchy, I mean, we already know this in terms of our assistant, associate, full professors, you know, vice presidents, vice provosts, and so forth. This particular crisis across the board, these crises, have really brought to bear inequities that happen at staff level. If a person is a coordinator, an assistant director, a director, associate director. And so what I've tried to do is to try to do some reclassifications, for example, for various staff, bring situations to the forefront when there are opportunities for women to move into different positions. I have taken on more of a mentoring role to review CVs and to let people, and particularly women, know what opportunities are available. But most recently, this really hits home. I started a center that just sort of publicly launched on Thursday called the IDEA, the Institute for Diversity, Equity, and Advancement. And there are actually three women of color who are part of that center, one as a faculty director, one as a program director, and one as a program coordinator. And those are positions that put them in the forefront that weren't there before. We also have a newsletter where we're elevating women in our newsletter. I have a column that I write every 2 weeks. And so I try to highlight what women are doing around campus, regardless of their background. I try to pay attention to where they are in the ranks, because I want to make sure that we are not privileging some ranks over others, but making sure that people who usually either don't have a voice, or their voices aren't amplified, or their positions are not seen as being important, that we recognize what the importance is and how much they're contributing. And so those are some of the things that I've been trying to do, not only on our campuses, but to also let other people know around the country in sessions like this, how important it is to pay attention to women across the gamut, regardless of what position they're in, and making sure that there's respect, but also honoring of their work, and making sure that they also receive not only benefit, but recognition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I have a couple of questions for Lidia, and I think we'll also go back to what she was describing at that time. And the question is actually related to that. Lidia, you were talking about that how the leaders were rethinking their approach when the young generation came out, and regardless of men and women, they protested the government's policies. And despite the pandemic, they were out on the street and they were fighting for justice, and the university came and their rescue. I wouldn't say rescue, but their support, rather. They immediately supported, immediately said that we support you. And if you miss a class, that's fine. I mean, these kind of things just to support the students. Now, this is one way to think the entire population, but in what way? Is there any other example that your university has shown to sort of support inclusivity and foster female talent during this time?
Yes, thank you for this question. You know, the communication is in some way difficult. So in fact, what happened that time, we got a new position of mediator at university, and it occurred to be a person from completely not connected with engineering or with anyone or anybody from our university. And this is a part-time job, but this woman started the action like university is a woman, just an action when she asked openly to all students and especially researchers, are you interested in joining a group where we could do something to support women's talent and their problems during the not only pandemic but during their careers and development. So this is the new way how those people who are interested in some focusing on some topic can cooperate together, and either it's not a representative official board by the rector, it still gets power because we are learning how to communicate through internet, and this is only because of pandemic. This could probably not happen before because that would be announced a small group of meeting for 5 or 10 experts, and now everyone can share. So perhaps we will learn in that way how to communicate wider and how fast the knowledge and the messages, important messages, are spread. And this I look at it like a positive part of that new area at university. Yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
Thank you so much. I have a question for actually from for Adriana, and this is Adriana. What are the key contributing factors of gender disparity in Latin America? What are women doing now to change that? Again, you have been put on mute, and I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yes, Soma, repeat please the
It
question.
is, sure. What are the key contributing factors of gender disparity in Latin America, and what are women doing now to change that? Could Uriel help you?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
¿Entendiste, Adriana, la pregunta o querés que te la diga?
Si quieres, repítemela porque no eran las que tenía programadas y te la puedo.
¿Cuáles son los factores que más influyen en la disparidad entre hombres y mujeres y cómo se puede encarar o tratar de resolver?
Ok, Andy.
Puede responderlo en español haciendo intervalos y yo podría intentar traducirlo.
The English, despite the difficulties in balancing family life and work, women can make the decision not to participate in scientific careers. We at universities have networks, institutions, and different levels to the more reverse the disparity. Having a great many challenges, but also opportunities. The COVID-19 pandemic can change the rules of the game for women science around the world, whether positive or negative. It is important to me that men and women united, they put gender issues aside because breakthrough for industrial revolution and recorded having the skill in the STEM, as well as the construction of an innovation ecosystem to ensure a response to change with competitive of effective staff to take on these new roles. In Latin America, for the foundation of the innovation ecosystem, innovation skill, creativity, and emotional intelligence are required. Thus, in this area, women have a different role, surely giving a turn gender stereotypes with necessary skill to contribute to the development of the technical future on to face the new economic and labor realities, as well as the role required in Industrial 4.0. In this very is well possible to build a stronger, more dynamic, inclusive, and equitable economy, where it will open the way relation with matching and not between genders, allowing addition to redefine labor relation.
Yeah. Gracias. Thank you. I have a question for Paul. Um, and this says to Paul Gilbert, how can he, as a man surrounded by strong women, as you described, teach other men to support women's talents and development?
Unmuted. That's that's a really good question, and I'm a big believer in sending messages. So for there's company policies, which I think I can send a message to everyone that the company is a safe place, setting guidelines, making sure that the role models in the company who have made it to a higher level are there to mentor the younger women, much like you described, Renetta. I think that's incredible. To give freedom to go to conferences, to attend things like we're talking about here, events like this. I think policy company related to flexible hours, ensuring that the caring is valued. One of the things which I was actually very happy about is our flexible hours policy not only help the women in our company, help the partners of male employees as well, because they had wives and partners who were working, and so that their partner could actually achieve something which was more optimal for them than just focusing on the male. Actually, that was a proactive policy that we put in place so that the male could actually provide more care for young children and do the school. And signals are really important. So with my leadership team and the next level down, we had to encourage that. The other thing which I was really the culture that we've developed in our company, and I think this isn't easily done, but is provided space for advocating for women. Sometimes it's intimidating for a guy to talk about supporting a woman because they might not be deemed strong enough or manly enough or have enough testosterone. I think those days are gone. I mean, ages that we're talking about there. And so I think it's really, really encouraging for me to see the younger guys in my business being willing to younger people. I think beyond my own company, the other ways that I can do it is I can attend conferences like this. I can room when there's not women. That's another thing which I've noticed all my life. My dad was raised like a white guy, and often when I had people in the room talking about other ethnicities, I actually felt associated to that culture. I think the same can be said when men are talking the voice in the room, to explain to them that's not acceptable, that those kinds of things are not acceptable. And I also, on a large, to be advocating for policy changes. I mean, equitable parental leave should go to both men and women. I mean, if you have women are allowed 3 months and 2 weeks. That's sending a signal that the woman should stay home, and it's not the man's responsibility. I think it was Denmark or Iceland. Oh no, since 2003, they've had a 3-month parental leave policy, and the average male days to 95 days, which I think makes a huge impact on the way their home lives are. I think it's about sending the message privately, publicly, and in terms of policies, but also being a part of lobbying in terms of state or national type policies.
Thank you so much. And I hope really everything that you said happens. We have about 13 or 12 minutes. And I have now a question for, this is for Renetta. It says that, do you feel young women are rising and taking more seats at the table now because of diversity hiring rules, or because their talents are truly being seen?
That can be a loaded question. I would say I think that there are a number of things at play. So one of the things that I'll just connect to what Paul said a few minutes ago. So Paul said in his position, for example, as a head of a company, that he is sort of looking across, he's working with his HR director, et cetera, making sure that there are policies in place that are going to elevate women. And I'm seeing that, and we're seeing in the US, a number of companies, a number of universities who I would say have had their eyes opened, if they want to open them, to situations that have been either unjust or inequitable, and paying attention to those and looking at structures and structural barriers that have been in place for many, many years that have held people back. And they are either changing those policies or creating different policies to make sure that there are more opportunities for people to advance across the board. Because that is happening, and because many of the structural barriers are being examined and examined closely, then that is bringing to the forefront talents of women of color that have been there all along, but in some cases have been suppressed, or in some cases have been I would say outright ignored. And so it's a combination of having policies in place, of examining policies that have been in place for many, many years as part of institutions, that people are saying, okay, we are going to take responsibility for some of our historical issues that we've had to deal with, and take it from there. There's a context that we are using at UC Davis by two of my colleagues, Dr. Maisha Wynn and Dr. Lawrence Wynn, and it's called it's from the Transformative Justice and Education Center, and it talks about 5 pedagogical stances, and those stances are history, race, justice, language, and futures. And the idea is that you have to look at the historical context in order to make better policies for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it was a tough question because, I mean, how we answer. I have a question for Michael, and let me read it from the question panel. And I think Michael, seeing it from a very unbiased way, if I say, and saying it from a very neutral perspective, and you are in Europe, but seeing it, you have this, I mean, in an envious position in UNITAR to see, being in United Nations, you can see the world, what's happening, especially the context of SDGs. The question is how women in STEM can restart our plans for research. With pandemia last year, the priorities were to take care of the family and work teaching, but we didn't have so much time to prepare projects or make networking. Is there some ways to do it again? So what will be your recommendations or advice?
Thank you, Soma.
Yeah.
Thank you, Soma. Yes. During the pandemic, usually we have our activities ranging from face-to-face and online. And what happened during the pandemic is that we have to shift everything online, and we have to work with our partners and donors to be able to deliver that. So there is a complete turnaround on everything else. What we have realized is that many of our projects and even internal guidelines was already focusing on engaging our beneficiaries. We're measuring ourselves in terms of how we accommodate women as our beneficiaries. So we've been trying to be very sort of accommodating in how we deliver them. Our partners and donors were also more focused on the approach that we are taking. At the same time, we know that there are different situations. It's not only about your context as a family. I'll give you an example on what we have done with a project on entrepreneurship, harnessing artificial intelligence in entrepreneurship for women in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, this was funded by Sweden through our strategic framework fund, and we partner with Stanford University, private sectors from Japan like Fuji Xerox, focusing only on women. And we realized that during the time we were launching, there's not only pandemic COVID-19, there's also social unrest on the ground, and all the issues relating to gender equality. So how would you develop, how would you roll out such kind of project in a very challenging situation? So we have to give space to be able to deliver it. We have to work with our partners to be able to, usually we deliver it face-to-face, but now everything is online. And we have to accommodate all the security issues. We are unable to provide face-to-face, putting an expert on the ground, but we were able to find solutions like working with coaches and experts who are coming from the country, even from their local communities, to be able to deliver what we need to deliver, working on with them, contextualizing from their specific context and realities. So over the past few months, we've also been learning. We have also increasing our gender champions within our institute. Also, Mihoko, whom we have met earlier on, is a gender focal point within UNITAR and very much active in this part. Our executive director always measures how we are sticking to providing our beneficiaries with especially women. And every January we have to report on it. Where are they coming? Which country? Which are the institutions, industry, and how many are women in that part? We also have within UNITAR, there is a unit that follows us in terms of our quality and how we are developing our delivering our activities. So they come up with impact stories. And I would say that a lot of the projects, even on my side, I deliver projects as well. A lot of them are really focusing now on women empowerment. We also have a funding on STEM, not on STEM, but on technology related, that would like to train 1,000 women again in Afghanistan. We love to be in places where there's really sort of a requirement for the United Nations to be present. Women also, we are also coming in to Sahel region, probably one of the most difficult region in the world. The ambassador of Japan, who was who speaks on the opening of this session, was also mentioning it because the government of Japan is closely interested in empowering women in difficult situations. So UNITA is really on this side, and probably the COVID-19 has accelerated us into moving into the technology. But what I would really want to as part of my intervention is that you, Adriana, Renetta, and Paul and Lydia, you're all an inspiration to women and girls. And I think what we also need is that we should continue to feature you, your journey, because you are here to inspire. You are already a role model.
Our
and
journey.
Your research, yes, your research and in inspiring women and girls and how to address the global challenges. I think that's one thing that we really need to, I would say, focus more. I'll take a quick example. I have a teenager son who's trying to now see what direction in life he will be. And I'll ask him, what's which direction? I say, I'm going to science and technology. And then how many are you choosing that direction? Well, we are 20 in our class, or half of them are girls, half of them are boys. And he said, most of the boys are choosing STEM, and most of the girls are choosing non-STEM. And I would ask, what's missing here? An inspiration? Probably. So I'd like to, it's an open-ended question. I'm not an expert in this area, but I would like that you as an expert continue to provide inspiration to all the women and girls around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for saying this, and we really appreciate. I'm thanking on behalf of all three of us, all four of us, actually, Adriana, Renetta, Lydia, and myself. And taking it from there, I just want to say that um, I am in engineering, of course, and my brother is an art historian and teaches liberal arts and languages in Canada. So, I mean, we are the examples of how people can be different, men and women. I want to have we are at the top of the hour, so I want to have one just quick thought on a reflection to end that. If I start from having this morning, what I am seeing over and over again and again, that women had to take a disproportionate amount of workload at household because of the pandemic, because that is the way it is. I mean, to be very honest, I don't want my kitchen to be invaded by my husband, because then things take time to get organized again. But at the same time, when I'm at home during the pandemic, when he helped me, it was really nice. So I am very, very encouraged by both Paul and Michael's words, and that it's not just women's job, it's both men and women's responsibility to bring a harmony in this for specifically for the women in STEM. Encourage the women and girls in STEM and keep them in STEM workforce and help them to succeed. So with this, I want to thank all of you, Lydia, Renetta, Adriana, Paul, Michael, thank you so much. Thanks to UNITAR, IFES, GDC for having this. And this is not the end of the conference. This is just, we are coming to a middle, I would say. We have two regional sessions and the closing ceremony. So don't go away from this link. Keep this link handy. And we will now break for half an hour. And at the top of the hour, at 4 o'clock, we will, 4 o'clock London time, we will come back with the session in Middle East and North Africa. And this is the exact same link that you have used for this, we'll use, and we'll come back. And 4 o'clock will be, I think it is 8 o'clock in West Coast Renetta's time, and the rest of the other times, I think you can calculate. Thank you so much, and see you all again at another time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you all. It was lovely meeting you, Paul and Michelle and Renetta. I'll meet you someday in your California. Adriana, bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
you
This
so
was
much.
wonderful. So good to see you.
Good to see you too.